From the people that made D&D mainstream, and now from the people who actually made D&D, comes a game that intends to create the perfect mixture of combat and narrative, Daggerheart.
Its goal is to be fiction first, by focusing on the story rather than the mechanics. But can it actually do so? And if it does, what does it lose along the way?
Hello and welcome to Tabletop Trends, where we take a look at the most fun and creative TTRPGs out there, ranging from the big names to the more obscure. We'll let you know how the game works, what makes it special, the things you might love, and the things you might not love. By the end of it, you should know what the general idea of how the game feels, and if it might be a good fit for your table.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to book the designers of Daggerheart to talk with, but we instead have a panel of people who've played the game, and we'll discuss common criticisms of it. At the end, we'll also share our favorite and least favorite things about the system. So we've all played some Daggerheart together. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. You can find me at Exploring the Build on YouTube. I usually do character builds, mostly for D&D, but now also shifting into Daggerheart territory as well.
And I'm Zarek, the lead designer of Indominant at Odin's Key Gaming, and that's mostly what people would know me for.
This is a game where every roll of the dice advances the story. It advances it not only narratively, but also mechanically. You see, the dice you roll is 2d12, one for a hope die and one for a fear die. When you roll them, if the hope die is higher, it's called you rolled with hope, and you will gain a hope resource for your character. If the fear is higher, then the DM will gain a fear token that they can use and expend on things in the game. If it's a tie, then it's a critical success and is considered a roll with hope. So hope is used to activate character abilities, and fear is used to activate GM or enemy abilities. As the game goes on, players will gain and spend their hope, and GMs will gain and spend fear. With these dice rolls, you have 4 outcomes. You can succeed with hope, succeed with fear, fail with hope, and fail with fear. If it's a roll with fear, you will have something bad happen even if you succeeded on the check. And if it's a roll with hope, you will have something good happen even if you failed the check. This can definitely complicate things. Here's an example from our game where we succeeded with fear.
That is a
19 with fear.
19 with fear. So you are able to, you start climbing, you start making it up, you make your way up, but this is becoming a progressively more strenuous task for you than you probably would have expected. You are going to be able to make it up to the top. You are going to mark a stress in the process of doing so.
Now, I've seen a lot of criticism about Daggerheart, saying that it will be very difficult for GMs to run because of the amount of improv that they need to do. Succeeding with fear is especially difficult to think up creative and new things each time. In fact, this game requires a lot more improv than D&D, and in fact, it incentivizes and asks players to add to the story, and the GM will have to run with those and improv as well. So this brings us to our first panel question. Do you think Daggerheart requires a really skilled GM to run, or even skilled improv players?
I do think the way that Daggerheart's intended to be played does require a very skilled GM and skilled players, like in that the skill of improv.
I think requires is a strong word. I don't think any game requires good anything. You can kind of do it and just see how it goes, and you kind of get better and better the more that you do it, and the more that you play, the more that you learn your table, the more you learn your group, the more that you learn the rules. You get, and even the more you improv, you get better at doing more improv. I don't know.
Maybe
I don't know that
like, does it ask more of a GM than D&D, I guess?
So I think to a certain extent it can, depending. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think to say that does it ask more of a GM, probably. Succeeding with fear is extremely challenging because they almost certainly will feel the detriment to that, even though it still was a successful roll. So being able to not undermine your group's success or not undermine the player's success while still imposing a consequence is very challenging.
We're also seeing Daggerheart, since it's brand new, from like a D&D or other tabletop RPGs perspective of like those DMs going and playing Daggerheart. And I'm curious as to if someone were to pick up Daggerheart as their first TTRPG system, how that would turn them into a GM. Like, would they end up getting those improv skills and not even think about it?
One thing I do think about with the difficulty is I feel like they ask a lot in combat, where they talk about these like shifting tides, where as they roll fear and stuff, it feels like the enemy's like gaining on them, and then the players have a thing, and they talk about this in the book where it's like, you know, this wave back and forth to build up the excitement.
There is some of that where I think a lot of it just comes to like just language choice, which probably comes down to your experience with the system and the way that you learn to improv. Because like when we're playing, it's like, okay, roll the fear. Okay, cool. I'll grab a fear token. Where instead you can just shift, instead of saying, you know, I grab a fear, I'll take a fear token or whatever. You can instead of saying I take a fear token, you can just start saying what's happening. You start saying what you're doing instead. Because when you roll with fear, it's my turn.
Yeah.
So instead of saying I'm going to take a fear token, you just start saying, and you know, and as that happens, you watch outside as the sky begins to darken, and all of a sudden the meteor falls down. You know what I mean? Like you just launch directly into it. It was kind of satisfying to be able to just interrupt your guys' like flow and being able to just take control of the moment when you guys are like on an upswing and just shut it down is is like weirdly satisfying.
I think there is something baked in there with the adversaries, the way the mechanics work, is all meant to have that climactic, like maybe not every fight, but a lot of fights can have those climactic swings in tempo. And then the way you narrate that interruption with fear and everything is like the cherry on top, or the icing that covers up what the work that the mechanics are doing themselves.
So maybe it asks more of GMs and players in terms of improv. But what about mechanics? Do they overwhelm? Let's go over the resources that players have to manage. You see, there are several meta currencies that players will need to deal with as the session goes on. These are things that all classes and all players will share. There are some unique things to certain classes, like the Seraph's Prayer Dice, but they're kind of rare. Every character is going to have a certain amount of hope, like we've already discussed, but they also have stress, hit points, and armor slots. You can spend a hope to add your background to an ability check, aid an ally, or even do a cool combo attack with your party. But you'll also pick up abilities that consume hope in order to activate. Stress is similar to hope, except you start out with 0 stress and you gain stress as you do certain things. So you'll have abilities that activate by spending stress or gaining stress. And once you max out on stress, you are vulnerable, means you're easier to hit. And a lot of combat is managing these resources to make sure you have enough when you need them. And I personally really like these 2 resources. I think they have a really interesting narrative concept that also ties into the mechanics. The other 2 meta currencies, hit points and armor slots, are related to the damage and armor system, which is kind of controversial, and we will have a panel discussion about it in a little bit. When you attack, you roll those 2d12, and you compare the number to the enemy's difficulty. That's like their AC in D&D. If you hit them, you then roll damage, and then you take that damage number and compare it to certain thresholds that the enemy has. So instead of just rolling that damage and they lose that much, they will either lose 1, 2, or 3 hit points, depending on which threshold group your damage lies in. So you have a minor threshold, and anything under that will be 1 hit point lost. Major will be 2 hit points, and severe is 3 hit points lost. And that's right. The max amount of hit points you can make an enemy lose on an attack is gonna be 3, unless you've got some special stuff going on. But if you deal 1,000,000 damage, it's still just 3 hit points. Now that can be a little discouraging, but on the flip side, if you deal a ton of damage and you find out it goes to the boss's minor threshold, you're gonna feel pretty scared as a player.
4d20 plus 5 coming at you.
48
to the little one, 24 to Charmaine.
So Charmaine ends up hitting in her minor threshold.
Okay,
and
let's go.
Her
We got a
helper buddy,
game.
and her helper buddy ends up hitting in the major threshold.
Now for players, they have armor slots, and those can be used to reduce the severity of your damage. So if you take a severe hit, you can use an armor slot, exactly 1, to reduce it to a major, or from a major to a minor, or from a minor to nothing. Now this depends on the armor that you are wearing. So if you're wearing heavier armor, you might have more armor slots, meaning you can activate it more times, and the threshold numbers might be bigger, Since those thresholds are tied to your armor, as you level up, you're going to have to change out your armor in order to increase those damage thresholds, which is very important. So you'll start out with maybe leather armor, and then go to improved leather armor, and then go to advanced leather armor, and so on. Okay, so those are the resources you have to manage in combat. But what does combat look like? First off, there's no initiative. You don't roll numbers and see who goes first. Instead, you have players' turns and GM turns. And on the player's turn, you can spotlight any particular player or their character, depending on who wants to go when. The spotlight will stay on them for as long as it makes sense narratively, so they might do multiple actions before giving it off to the other person. But usually they'll just do one before passing it on. However, it does add a lot of freedom into battle, allowing people to combo and do multiple things together that makes more narrative sense than other more strict initiative systems allow for. It can make combat a lot more interesting and engaging to players because instead of sitting around waiting for your turn, any turn could be yours, and you can wait and see what the best time to use your ability would be. Now, the big hiccup is that if you fail a check, or you roll with fear, then play will pass to the GM, meaning it's the GM's turn. The GM then activates one enemy before passing play back to the players. But they can choose to spend fear to activate multiple enemies on their turn.
He's going to go ahead and just stab right into you, and the other guard is going to waste absolutely no time. I'm going to spend a fear to activate a secondary adversary. I'm going to spend another fear to activate a third adversary. That's going to be the end of the guard's turn. You guys are up. Whoever wants to go, you guys just do your thing.
Since play can only transfer back to the GM when you roll dice, this means you can activate a bunch of abilities that require no roll. So when an ally is going to make a big attack or whatever, you can jump in and activate an ability to help them. And it doesn't require you spending a reaction or it being your turn at all in order to do that. So it feels very narrative.
17 is not successful.
I'm going to use support tank. When an ally within close range fails a roll, you can spend 2 hope to allow them to re-roll their hope or fear die. Please re-roll your hope die.
Well, that's a 6. So that changes it. Well, plus 5. So
yeah, change to a 22. 22 is successful, yes.
Or you could also stack up a bunch of buffs on yourself on your turn before doing a big attack.
First, spend 2 hope to cast Parallella on myself. So the next attack I do will be able to target 2 people instead of just 1. I'm then going to cast Smite on myself by spending the last 3 hope that I have. So if the attack hits, it deals double damage. And I'm going to use the Powered Gauntlet's charged ability to mark a stress to gain +1 proficiency on a primary weapon attack. And then I am going to attack with the Runes of Ruination, which required me to mark a stress. But if we hit, we're doing a lot of damage. 58 doubled because of Smite, so 116 to both of them.
I think I know why they have the damage thresholds now.
Yeah.
If you're interested for how likely it is that the GM will have a turn after you roll, well, there's about a 58.3% chance that your roll will be a roll with hope. And then there's about a 70% chance that you will actually succeed on the check. Obviously, this depends on what you're doing and who you're attacking, but it ends up being about a 40% chance that you will succeed with hope, meaning a 60% chance that you will either fail or roll with fear, and then pass back to the GM. So definitely keep that in mind if you're planning on doing multiple things in a row. Alright, so in combat, what can you actually do on your turn? First off, every single character can make attacks, and they can make attacks very well. There are weapons that every person can use, even if you're a wizard. There are knowledge-based weapons. And then every character will get a bunch of cards, and every card has an ability that is either a passive or an active ability. These are called domain cards, and you get to choose one every level. There are 9 domains, and every one of them has a different theme and feel. Every class will get access to 2 domains, meaning every domain is shared by 2 classes. For example, some of the themes of the domains are like healing and support, weapon focus, sneakiness, nature theme, things like that. Some examples would be one that lets you spend a stress to heal an ally, or one that you spend a hope to teleport, or one that adds your strength modifier to your damage rolls. You can only have 5 of these domain cards in your loadout at a time, meaning you can only activate those 5. You can swap them with one that is not currently in your loadout by spending some stress to grab it out at any time. Or if you're resting, you can swap them out for free. Alright, now that we've gone over the rules of combat, it's time for our next panel question. Is combat too complex? And does it fit the design goals of the system?
I personally don't think it's that complex. What I think the damage thresholds does well is it lets you roll a lot of dice, which is fun, and then it just simplifies the math a bit so that you're not subtracting 50 from 123, or whatever. You're just marking 1, 2, or 3 health. It's almost like a nice balance between crunchy and like fun rolling lots of dice and simple.
My understanding is that kind of was the design goal, was really just to allow players to get the big number because it's fun to roll dice and get like 78. Like it's fun to do that kind of thing. But then to like, Zarek, you're saying it's annoying to have to be like 157 minus 78 is but just to be able to just, okay, take that 78, just look at a threshold, be like, okay, 3. And it makes that process really easy. I don't think it's complex anymore.
I would say it's about learning to be satisfied with the rules as presented. It's not about dealing 100 damage. It's about saying, haha, your health bar is now smaller.
I have hesitations on whether it meets their design goals. So it feels like they want to have the narrative seep into like every part of the game. They've simplified a lot of other things. You're doing less rolling, like the numbers are smaller for other stuff, and then they're like damage. They're like, well, okay, you have to roll to see if you hit them. And then you roll your damage, which is a big number, and then we're going to compare to thresholds, and then we're going to put that into their HP, and then we could potentially mark some off to reduce some, and we can have an infinite number of reactions that do this from the rest of the party to modify it or whatever. So it feels like kind of detracts from the narrative in that way, right? It's like it feels like it's gonna be hard to stay in the narrative while all that math is like spinning in your head.
Sorry. Do you think they
it's
can
pretty
kind of go both ways though at the same time? Where it could, I can see a world where it detracts, but can you also not do? I can also kind of see a world where it does the opposite, where as you're doing that, because there is an infinite number of reactions that can potentially influence. It does also allow that narrative to for a guardian to step in and say use I am your shield as you're taking the damage. I'm shooting to step in and use this thing. You can kind of have that narrative play out again. If you just don't say the mechanics, you can just have the same thing happen and just still weave the narrative into it. Now that probably seeps back into the other question about like, do you think the game requires talented players and GMs and to do that kind of shit? Yeah, it probably does. But I mean, like, I think they can kind of go both ways. Where if you distill everything down to this number minus that minus that minus that minus that minus that compared to that, then yeah, it could probably get a little bit kind of tiresome. But I can see how there are ways to weave the narrative into it to keep the action going.
So I think that there's ways that you can blend that in if like you're consciously thinking about it. But I think it demands more, which kind of goes back into exactly what we're saying. Like it demands more of the players to make the narrative, and often games that are more narrative focused lose rules to focus on the narrative. But this one, like combat, gains rules, which gives you opportunities to have narrative, but also makes it more difficult to actually keep that in mind while it's happening. Now that we've gone over combat complexity and fit for the system, let's talk about speed of combat. Is it faster than D&D? And let's talk about player engagement. Will you feel more or less engaged than a game like D&D?
I think it makes it easier for players to be engaged because one thing I noticed was like, when you take the spotlight, it's kind of just quick in that sense where you just do one thing every time you take the spotlight. It comes back around faster in that sense, I guess. I think it's easier to be more engaged for disengaged players, but I don't know. I just personally, speed doesn't make combat interesting to me. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Same-ish to me.
First of all, yeah, I love combat in Daggerheart compared to D&D. Like I still love D&D, but Daggerheart just feels a lot more action RPG-esque, where like if you're doing something, it's going to be cool. Like it could just be a single hit, but that hit could be a really big hit that takes out an enemy. It could be a big AoE move. There's so many different things you can do and enemies can do. It's really cool. In the end, like almost like the last 2 turns or rounds, I guess as well, of the game we did where I was playing as Mac, and like I know I had the powerful, super overpowered build and was like the big gun. I did not want to go. There were times where it's like, oh, who should go? Well, Mac's going to do the most damage. Yeah, but I don't want to. You guys should go. You guys should,
Yeah.
do stuff. It's like, but it's not gonna kill them though. But I could see someone being like more domineering and saying, well, no, I'll take it because I can actually hurt these guys. Otherwise, X, Y, Z could happen. That stuff. Probably the biggest drawback, even though still love the actual combat system, I just think it requires that trust from the players to care more about just running with the narrative and not necessarily playing a full numbers game of like, no, we need to get rid of them now because we need to win and all that sort of stuff. Just
I think
roll with it, let it happen.
I blame balance for that.
Yeah, I do too.
There's
Something to be
definitely some
desired.
questionable balance there for sure.
I think the engagement was way higher in my mind, but I was also a support character. And so that's another thing that I really like about Daggerheart, the initiative system. For support characters, it makes you feel so much better. Because as long as you've got the resources to spend to help people, you can do it anytime, everybody's turn. Yeah.
I can see how playing a support would feel exceptionally good with this type of an issue system, because it's the constant problem of like the biggest issue of like structured initiative is having the thing like I know what I'm gonna do, I know what I'm gonna do, I know what I'm gonna do, and then but you're not for like 5 more players, and then by the time it gets to you, it doesn't matter anymore, and
So
it's like, oh shit, I gotta do
frustrating.
something else. But in this game, but in this game as a support, the second max out of resources or someone's about to go down, you can just jump in, and that feels like such a satisfying way to actually have a support character just basically totally empowered by the initiative system.
I would be curious to have played a support character now that you mentioned that. That's a good point. I feel like supports almost get the most out of the initiative system.
Absolutely.
I think so.
Because I didn't necessarily feel that way.
I remember Julio as a rogue did like the big Rain of Blades AoE attack, and it was just like, do it again. Go ahead. Who cares?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
very
exactly.
good
Being
system
able to
for
do
support.
multiple things in a row, where like it feels like, okay, like it makes sense for me to like spend my turn running over to that person and then healing them. You know, it's like by the time I spend my turn running, and then it's a whole other action, and then actually like the combat's done, and it feels like so unfulfilling.
It almost kind of helps feed that whole narrative thing too, right? It's like keeping your allies going, keeping the action going. Like let's do it. Like, I like it.
Okay, now that we've gone over most of the rules of Daggerheart, let's discuss how they're melding the narrative and the combat focus together. I think with their revamped initiative system, play goes the exact same way as out of combat. So it doesn't feel like there's a loading screen and now you're in combat and things function differently. So it feels seamless.
Out of my coat, I'm gonna take out a scalpel. I'm like, look, we're here to heal the king.
The second you do that, the guard standing at the gate wastes absolutely no time. He just whips out his sword in an incredibly trained fashion and just goes ahead, and he's going to make an attack against you. 15 to hit.
Another is that you're gaining combat resources in and out of combat as well. Also, you can use your character's backgrounds in combat. By spending a hope, you can add your background bonus to your attack rolls. And then, another way they do this is by having certain abilities that activate only after doing a little bit of role-playing. Abilities like this one. Mending touch, once per long rest. I can reveal something about myself to clear 2 hit points or 2 stress on you. You know, back when I was a Sherpa, there was this one time. Now, those are really cool. And I think all those things we've just discussed are great at helping merge the narrative and the combat together. But some think that this is too much role-playing for a role-playing game, or maybe too much improv, and that really this game is designed and intended for theater kids. Is Daggerheart a game for theater kids?
I look at it as like create something that you would want to see out in the world, or like you would want to play, you would want to enjoy. And from there, then like everything else follows afterwards. And I think Darrington Press going and making a system for the Critical Role table is exactly what happened. Like they wanted a game and a system that fit their play style, but it's not necessarily explicitly for theater kids. It's just that this is what they wanted, their passion project, even though it was like their company that made it.
I am big on like narrative stuff myself. It definitely leans a lot more into improv though, and like giving more narrative control to the players, which I think is probably why people really focus in on that idea that it's for theater kids. To me, that's what TTRPGs are about, and so focusing more on that story aspect or performative aspect with the improv is not necessarily a bad thing.
I do feel like there's truth to it in that there's a lot more improv than D&D, at least the way that they want the game to be run, right? Like the way that the Hope and Fear works, like it influences the world in a improv way, and they invite players to add stuff that changes the world on the fly. And so there's a lot of things changing on the fly that D&D isn't it's not designed around. The world's not changing because of what you've rolled.
Even though it might be a game that theater kids enjoy and it might have been designed by theater kids, I think what I've seen so many of the comments of is that it's like a game that's can only for some reason be enjoyed by those types of people, and that if you like mechanically rich games or anything like that, then you will necessarily not enjoy Daggerheart because it's a game that's just about improv and trying to win an Oscar.
So I think if you don't love the role-playing aspect of tabletop games, then you can still play Daggerheart without that. But you're probably better suited for another game because those rules are pretty interwoven into Daggerheart. And now let's move on to our last panel question, where we discuss the things we like and the things we don't enjoy or are hesitant about in Daggerheart. I really like Hope and Stress. I like that they're both terms that people understand that your character would have, both of those that would change throughout the day based on the circumstances. It feels like intuitive resources, and it makes sense that like stress, like as you're doing stuff in combat, like it stresses you out, like, and it's fine as long as you don't get too stressed, in which case it's gonna really be bad for you. The other thing I really like is those ability cards that are tied to the narrative that I really think those are so super cool. Where it's like
the ones where it's like make a compliment your ally. You mean like one of those?
Yeah, right. Where it's like it's not just like, hey, like they heal 2. It's like compliment your ally, and then like you both clear 2 stress or something like that. And it feels like it's gonna combine that combat and the narrative. I feel like that's kind of like the heart of Daggerheart in my mind, where like you are bringing the characters' stories into the combat in a way that actually is mechanically involved as opposed to like just role playing.
I like this too because they help like if you're not super comfortable with it, with like role play and speaking in character, those kinds of cards can just help you kind of ease into it.
Yeah,
it's just super basic. Like compliment your ally. You don't have to do anything like insane. You don't have to be a god tier improv anything. You can just compliment a player. And then you kind of do that a couple times and you get more comfortable doing that. And it's one of those things that could help you even just become better at, speaking in character and playing more narratively focused. So
my concerns or the things that I'm not super hot on for Daggerheart, I think one is the balance. I think like the weapons are kind of boring. I don't know. Like I don't enjoy like the weapon and an armor system as much. It kind of feels like video gamey, where it's like, oh, I'm tier 2 now, I'm gonna get my like tier 2 armor, which is gonna give me these thresholds, and like if I don't,
My favorite thing, I'm really not sure. Maybe the concept of the thresholds. Something I really like about that personally. The thing I have the biggest issue or worry about is balance, like Nathan said. Maybe we saw like the 2 biggest outliers on both the positive spectrum or like the high power spectrum with Mac and the low end with the Ranger.
I don't know if this is straight up cheating, but I would say my favorite part about Daggerheart is the character creation, true to form, character building, and all that. It's just been so much fun, like so much more fun than D&D character building, because there you're like doing research almost, going through the textbook, trying to see like, oh, okay, what works with what. With this, it's just, hey, you've got the cards, what cards are going to bounce off of which ones. You can physically hold them, see them. If you have a physical copy, you can see them online or whatever. My biggest worry that I have, the biggest worry is longevity. I do think it's really cool right now. There's a lot of hype around it. There's not a whole lot included, like we've been talking about with domains and things, and they definitely need to have more stuff out. So it's just about how well they can keep up that pacing as well as the hype train to really have it exist. I'm a little skeptical, but at the same time, I want it to last long. And leading into the point that I hate are the weapons, as there's very far and few between, because half of them are just upgrades of other weapons. And then the special ones are very weird and like not necessarily not balanced in any way, as we know various balance issues. They jump around. There's a lot of like just this is a weapon like that it is because why not? And it's just so weird, like such an odd toss up.
It is, and like if you have something in mind for your character, like you might stick around with this weapon for like your whole career, even though it's like a tier 2 thing or something like that, because this ability is only on a tier 2 weapon. I can't find this weapon any stronger, like even though I'm like a world conqueror or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing I think was the initiative. I went in super skeptical about it, being really concerned about how it was actually going to play out. And obviously, there is a little bit of like nerves the first couple times you do it. But I ended up loving the freedom, and I loved it even more as a GM, kind of getting to see the other side of it, the way you guys could play off each other and do different things. And then, like I said before, the interrupts and just being able to spend fear and do all that kind of stuff. Like, so I really, I thought the initiative system was super fun, really engaging. I really loved that aspect of it. My least favorite part is, or biggest concern, is kind of a combination of a lot of the things that you guys said. One, I think part of what's feeding the balance issues is that there's just not a lot there. And you have like 2 domain cards per level, and it's like, okay, there's a lot of potential there for growth. So I hope they seize that and kind of capitalize on that, because there's a lot that they can do with it. You guys are talking about weapons. I think the one that stuck out to me is because you guys know my favorite thing to talk about in this game is armor. It was the same kind of issue or the same kind of question I had about the MMO-ness of the armor, because like in D&D, you might get random armor bumps here and there, but for the most part, your AC is not shifting that much. Whereas here, it's like if you're not upgrading to tier 2 armor, by the time you're a tier 2 character or tier 3, you're just kind of dead. Like there's not really, you can't keep up. Like you have to do it.
Yeah.
Modifiers are too high once you get into higher territories. You can't be like, oh, I'm just not going to bother upgrading my armor. That's not an option. Like you need to go from your yellow armor to your red armor to your green armor or whatever. Right. Like, because if you're not, there's no way to keep up.
I think one thing I guess similar to that in terms of like the balance is, I feel like it's gonna be almost impossible for like your DM to make cards for you if like your cards suck and like, or you want something specific. You're like, I want my ranger to be able to do this. I want my rogue to be able to do that. Like I don't want to be overpowered. I just want to be able to do that thing. And like the GM's gonna look at the cards and be like, all 4th level cards. You're like, these are all over the place.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, like I have no idea what to give you that would make sense. It's like this 3rd level fireball is doing more damage than this 10th level spell. I don't understand what's going on here.
It's going to be next to impossible to reverse engineer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Sage just kind of sucks all the way through, as it turns out. But
Bone kind of does too. Yeah.
And I can't figure out what reasoning they would have some damage do proficiency and some not.
And it's weird because all cards that aren't proficiency locked seem to be locked for dealing good damage at the level you get them. Yes. And the next level, they're garbage, even though it's still the same tier and stuff. But it's just so strange.
So those are our biggest wins and disappointments of Daggerheart. Let us know what you like about the system and the things that you didn't enjoy. Also, a huge thank you to all of our panelists who joined in to play and discuss the game. After tackling this engaging role-playing narrative experience, it does make me wonder what else is out there waiting to be played.
Find out with us next time on Tabletop Trends.